That's what the love of money does.
Well, good evening. My name is Russ Matthews from City Bible Forum. I want to take a moment to welcome you to The Edge. If it's your first time coming to The Edge, we want to welcome you. For those of you who've been to the Edge event in the past, welcome back. For all of those overseas guests, thank you for coming along tonight or today, depending on where you are watching this event in the world. This year is a bit different. We will be doing these events live and also online in different cities throughout Australia. It's the same event you've come to know over the years, but with more of a local feel. Regardless of where the event is held, we hope you are able to engage with and enjoy tonight's discussion. Tonight, and every night at The Edge, whether it is live or online, it is short, sharp, and smart. Two speakers each have 15 minutes to share their wisdom and experience on a specific topic. Then you get to pose your questions to the panel. Short and sharp talks from two expert speakers on tonight's subject. We're going to be taking this topic to the edge. During the conversation, we may consider the bigger questions of life based on the subject spoken of by our speakers. Then by engaging with the speakers on the panel, we can consider the answers provided about this important subject. But really, the panel is your time to shine. Send in your questions throughout the talks at the Edge. These details should have been sent to you prior to the event. We do have a question master here to be able to go through and take in your questions and send them to the panel through our moderator. Now, just a small reminder, could you make sure you put down where you're sending it from so that we're able to know who we're speaking to and what part of the earth we're actually sharing this event tonight? When we get to the panel discussion, our moderator will pose these questions to our speakers. Can I ask something of you, though? If you want your question to be considered, in the spirit of this event, could you make sure to keep these questions short, sharp, and respectful? Thank you for asking your questions at the Edge. Tonight is short, sharp, and smart. The time is going to go by fast, and you will wish we had longer, I promise. I will come back after the panel discussion to share with you the next steps after tonight's discussion. But now, let's get to the event. Again, my name is Russ Matthews, and I'm going to hand this over to our moderator. Enjoy your time at the Edge.
Thanks, Russ, and welcome to The Edge. My name's Daniel Principe, and I'll be your host for this evening. Tonight and every night at The Edge is short, sharp, and smart. We're excited to know there are people from all over Australia dialing in and across the world. To kick things off and to test our question function, could you let us know where you're dialing in from? And from wherever you're watching. Tonight's SMS is in your Edge booklet, and I'll have it next to me on the screen. 0404 696 455. This is how you can send in questions throughout the night. It's how you can engage with the speakers, and it's our way of being part of the Edge. Tonight, our topic is never more connected, never more lonely. We are now more connected on social media and across our world. Yet people are experiencing loneliness at epidemic proportions. As we find connection through our devices, we yearn for human contact like never before, especially for those of us who have been in lockdowns. Tonight, through two short and sharp talks, plus a panel discussion, Dr. Natasha Moore and Dr. Sam Chan will be addressing connection and loneliness at the Edge. They'll be answering your questions and helping us to reflect on our lives and our relationships. Tonight's Edge speakers are here to inform us and help us to consider the hope that can be found in these topics with regards to connectedness and loneliness. You can find all of these details in the event booklet that was emailed to you on our event webpage. So let me introduce our two speakers. To mix things up, I'll be introducing our second speaker first. Our second speaker is Dr. Natasha Moore. Natasha is a research fellow at the Centre for Public Christianity. She's a PhD in English literature from the University of Cambridge and is the author of two books, Victorian Poetry and Modern Life, The Unpoetical Age, and For the Love of God, How the Church is Better and Worse Than You Ever Imagined. She's also the author of Top 10 Tips for Atheists and Other Conversations in Faith and Culture, and has worked for CPX since 2014, and written for the mainstream media on topics that include books, movies, politics, food, domestic violence, scripture in schools, freedom of speech, war, Thanksgiving, death, and taxes. Our first speaker for tonight is Dr. Sam Chan. Sam is one of our national communicators at Third Space. He's a cultural analyst, theologian, doctor, and public speaker, the author of 3 books, and a karaoke buddy. Sam was born in Hong Kong and grew up in Australia. He studied medicine at the University of Sydney and did his PhD in theology at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in Chicago. I know, having read these bios, I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion. I hope I can keep up, and the questions that follow. If you haven't already, please send us your questions. The number is on your screen. My name is Daniel Principe, and I'll be back after the talks to ask your questions to our speakers live. So in the tradition of The Edge, for keeping things short, sharp, and smart, let's welcome our first speaker, Sam Chan.
My little boy turned 10 just last month, and he threw a big party and he invited all his friends. But these days we had to do the party online, so I didn't think anyone would turn up because we're all zoomed out now, especially the kids. But all his friends turned up, which was amazing because I turned 50 a few years ago, but I didn't throw a party because I was worried no one would want to turn up. A friend of mine at church said, you know, the greatest miracle that Jesus ever did was not rising from the dead. The greatest miracle that Jesus ever did was that he was a man in his 30s, but he had 12 friends. Yes, one of those friends did betray him, but hey, still, it was a friend who betrayed him, which is sort of funny and sad at the same time, because loneliness is at epidemic highs right now. So welcome again to The Edge. Our topic is loneliness. Never more connected, never more lonely. So our question is this: what can we do about loneliness, and what is causing our loneliness? And it's a great question because a Lifeline survey has found that 60 to 80% of Australians say loneliness is a problem. This is Susan Pinker in her TED Talk, and she says, just like we have a biological need for water, we have a biological need for friendship. And the number one indicator for how long we will live is not exercise. It's not how much weight we lose. It's not whether or not we stop smoking. The number one indicator for how long we live is the quality of our social interactions, which is why another famous study has shown that loneliness is as likely to kill us as smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day. So what can we do about this? Well, this is where self-help books will say, well, we just got to get out there and make friends. But that's like yelling at a drowning person, hey, swim. You know, if we knew how to do this, we would be doing it. So what can we do? Well, here, let me suggest 5 things that might be causing loneliness and 5 things we can do about it. So number 1, friendships need shared moments. When I lived in Chicago, USA, I played rugby. And my team was mainly made up of people who were firefighters, they were in the military, and these Americans were big guys, and I was the smallest guy out there. But I still used to win man of the match every week because I was the only one who knew the rules. So I made a lot of good friends out there. But these days, we don't stay in touch. A New York Times article asked, why is it hard to make friends over 30? And it discovered that friendships need frequent, effortless interactions. So with my rugby friends, we don't meet frequently anymore. And if we did, it would take a lot of effort. Another study asks, how do friendships form? And the answer is this: the essence of friendship is proximity. And that's why most of our friends come from school, from work, and from sport, because we have proximity. But that's not hard to do that's not easy to do these days anymore, because with urbanization, we're just strangers. We're just another nameless face in the crowd. And with our Western lifestyle, we're always moving. We're changing jobs, we're changing schools, we're changing cities. So it's hard to get proximity. Number 2, friendships need a story. They say the happiest generation in the 20th century was a generation that lived through the Depression, the Blitz, and the war. But how is this? Well, they had a shared common purpose. They had a shared common story. But these days, the unhappiest generation is now. The number one reason for seeing a GP in Australia used to be the common cold, but these days it's for depression, anxiety, and stress, which is amazing because right now, if you could pick any time to be alive, it would be right now. We own more things, we live longer, we have free Wi-Fi in McDonald's, but somehow we're sadder than ever before. And one reason is this: we're lonely. And we're lonely because we don't have a common story, because we got told to do whatever it takes to be happy, but somehow that made us miserable. We got told to live for ourselves, but that's just made us isolated, insular, cut off, and alone. Number 3, friendships need sacrifice. Sebastian Junger, in his book Tribe, discovered that soldiers actually miss being at war. They don't miss the bad stuff, but they miss the good stuff. They miss the camaraderie, the belonging, the tribe. They say, I had someone to die for, and I had someone to die for me. And that's why soldiers will share a blanket when they're cold. They will give away their last bottle of water. They would charge over the trenches for a buddy, and they say, why? Because they would have done the same for me. And that is the essence of a tribe. And sociologists say we as humans need a tribe. We need a tribe of 150 people. We need a circle of friends of 30, and we need a close inner circle of friends of about 3 to 5. These are the people we ask for a lift to the hospital. We ask them to borrow money in an emergency, or we ask them to babysit with no notice. But these days, we don't even have that. And that's why we find ourselves driving 20 minutes to the shop for eggs rather than knocking next door and asking the neighbour for eggs. Number 4, friendships need security and safety. So far, we've looked at maybe what happens in our culture and Western individualism to cause loneliness. But what about me? What sort of person am I? What sort of friend am I? So we have what's called the relationship grid. And here we have 2 axes. On the vertical axis, we're measuring security. How secure am I in and of myself? And we should be in the middle. But if we're insecure, we go in either 2 directions. We can either be down on ourselves, and here we see ourselves as shameful. We're the idiots. We're worthless. We're dirty. Or we can be down on other people. They're the idiots. They're worthless. And on the horizontal grid, we have something that measures how safe we feel in relationships. What are our boundaries like? If we find ourselves dependent on love, needing the affirmation and love and validation from other people, well, here we're not safe because we have no boundaries and we're forever seeking unsafe relationships. Or we can go the other way, where we put up the boundaries. The walls are up. We're a fortress. We're cut off. And here we're boundaries, but we're not connected with anyone at all. It's like we're too safe. So we put these things together, well, we can end up in 4 quadrants. We end up in this corner. This is where we need validation and affirmation from relationships, but we're also down on ourselves, so we find ourselves needy and manipulative in relationships. In the other corner, if we are down on ourselves, but at the same time, we don't feel safe, we don't trust, the walls are up, well, here we're withdrawn and even depressed. In the opposite corner, here we need the love and affirmation from other people to be someone, but at the same time we look down on them. Here we are controlling in relationships, abusive and angry. And in the other corner, if we avoid people, but we also look down on them, well, we're going to be indifferent about relationships, passive and aggressive. Where we want to be is in this sweet spot in the middle, where we're safe in our relationships and secure in who we are. And here we would be a good friend to have, and people would want to also be our friend. But again, where does this come from? This is like yelling at a drowning person, swim. How can I be safe and secure in relationships? And here we have number 5, friendship needs strength. Strength from somewhere. Just like fitness needs oxygen and muscles for strength, friendships, relationships also need to find strength from somewhere. And this is where my Christian worldview really helps. Because in the Bible, we meet Jesus, the Son of God. And I reckon if Jesus was around today, he would look a little bit like this guy, because he was an Anglo, he was always hanging out at parties, and he was making friends. In fact, Jesus said, I came to seek and save the lost. Why? And he said this to his inner group of followers, so I could be your friend. And this is a quote from Jesus. I have called you friends. And how did he make this possible? Well, Jesus says, greater love has no one than this, but to lay down one's life of one's friends. Jesus does it through sacrifice, giving his own life. And this is why the greatest symbol to represent who Jesus is not a school where we learn teachings, not an army, but a cross where Jesus died and gave his life for his friends. And in this I find the strength I need for relationships, because in Jesus I have security and safety, the unconditional love from Jesus. I am safe, I'm secure, and I get my validation from Jesus. We have sacrifice, where Jesus sacrificed himself for me. We have story now, the God story, the gospel, where there's a God who loves me, who made me, who saves me, and who is now my friend. And we have a shared moment. In fact, the Bible gives Jesus the name Emmanuel, God with us, God sharing his life with us. So at the start of the talk, I said, just like we have a biological need for water, we actually have a spiritual need for relationships. And it's interesting that Jesus calls himself living water. He fills that need, but he also gives us the oxygen, the strength to be a good friend. Just last week, I had to lay some topsoil in my lawn, and so I ordered the soil. This is it. It was 4 tons of topsoil, and I had to get this into my backyard. So what did I do? I called a friend. And there's my friend in that corner. His name is Adam, and he's laying the topsoil for me. And see, Adam's doing what a friend does. He's doing me a favor by sacrificing his weekend for me. And I'm also being a friend. I'm doing him a favor by giving him a shared moment. And that's what friendship is all about, shared moments. And that's what life is all about, shared moments. But God goes one step further. God is Emmanuel, and he shares his life with us.
Last month, I came across a term I had not heard before, but that I instantly, intuitively felt I understood: relationship minimalism. We're pretty familiar now with minimalist movements. We use it to describe some forms of art or music. You can have minimalist architecture. But mostly these days, what we talk about when we talk about minimalism is lifestyle. The most visible icon of this streamlining trend is Marie Kondo, the queen of clean herself, author of The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. She made the move to TV in 2019, and she's just got a new Netflix series out. Marie Kondo is all about looking around at the stuff in your life, in your home, and asking the fierce question, does it spark joy? If you hold that pair of jeans and nothing, chuck it out, banish that sucker. It is clutter. Life is too short for harbouring anything that does not spark joy. Relationship minimalism seems to follow more or less this principle, but applied to people instead of T-shirts. A recent Guardian article told the stories of a number of young people who are embracing this new practice. Ronald Banks is a YouTuber living in Wisconsin. He started by Marie Kondoing his enormous wardrobe as a 21-year-old. But Banks, who is now in his late 20s, doesn't stop at discarding clothing or furniture. He's also getting rid of relationships that do not serve him any longer. He is part of a group of young people who are not only eschewing excess material items, but also meaningless relationships and excess emotional clutter. If their friendships are non-satisfactory, they declutter, opting for fewer but more quality relationships. If the city they live in no longer sparks joy, they move. And in a quest to trim down the amount of unnecessary emotional engagement with the world, some don't even use smartphones or social media. The article doesn't dive deep into what counts as emotional clutter or a more quality relationship, and it does also chronicle how some of these influencers have become disillusioned with their minimalism journey. But I found myself wondering how these stories, this move away from relationship mess, might intersect with a different story that's been emerging over the last decade or so, the loneliness epidemic. The latest research, a survey of Australians commissioned by Telstra and conducted by YouGov, reported that 9 out of 10 Australians experience loneliness, with 44% of us saying that we regularly feel lonely. 24% say they don't feel they have anyone to talk to. 35% say they rarely or never feel like they are part of a group of friends. And 48% say they're too embarrassed to admit feelings of loneliness to others. Half of Australians feel they can't talk openly about something that 90% of people say they feel at least some of the time. And of course, COVID has only made things worse. 27% of Aussies reported experiencing loneliness for the first time during COVID. 38% said they have never felt lonelier than they have in lockdown, which is probably not so surprising. Crises have a way of making visible, of surfacing things that were bubbling away underneath before. People who were thrilled with their Marie Kondoed apartments before COVID reported that they had some regret about throwing out so much stuff after finding themselves confined to their homes for months on end. Similarly, I wonder how relationship minimalism has fared over this past year or two compared with previously. Has COVID clarified for us who the important people in our lives are and made us feel like the rest are kind of take them or leave them? Or has it deepened our sense of need for a wide, tough, enduring web of relationships, or a bit of both? Let me say that I definitely feel the pull, the appeal of minimalism, of purging your life of the unnecessary, of making everything sleek and tidy and having it under control. I haven't yet been able to bring myself to Marie Kondo my possessions, like I get a bit sentimental, but I do love having my space and bringing order to it. I can't concentrate if there's clutter. And being a classic introvert, I certainly get the appeal of relational decluttering, of streamlining your social life as well. Long before COVID, I embraced the motto of the 30-something introvert: the best plans are cancel plans. I opted to wear my "I'm sorry I'm late, I didn't want to come" pin today, though I am glad I'm here, mostly. I always seem to be craving more alone time. Like, I enjoy seeing my people, but also I fill up pretty quickly, and not infrequently I'm like, okay, that's enough people time. Have I been here for long enough that it's not rude to go home already? But every now and then, I get the desire of my heart and my busy schedule dies down for a while and I think, for about a day. And then I realized that I should be careful what I wish for. Relationships are messy and complicated and tiring, but surprisingly to me, and maybe only to me, my neat, decluttered life, when I experience pockets of it, it's kind of thin and unsatisfying by comparison. So let's talk a little bit about mess and friendship and mess, about this new fashion for relationship hygiene, why it's tempting, why it's sterile. I want to read to you a little from a novel that I finished reading recently. My background is in English literature. Maybe they should have warned you. It's the new novel from Sally Rooney, a young Irish writer who has been called the voice of a generation. Her latest is called Beautiful World, Where Are You? And in it, a successful young novelist called Alice is writing to her oldest and at this point almost her only friend, Eileen, about friendship and community. And at the end of their 20s, feeling kind of allergic to commitment, but also a bit dissatisfied about that. Alice says, "In public, I'm always talking about care, ethics, and the value of human community. But in my real life, I don't take on the work of caring for anyone except myself. Who in the world relies on me for anything? No one. I can blame myself, and I do, but I also think the failure is general. People our age used to get married and have children and conduct love affairs, and now everyone is still single at 30 and lives with housemates they never see. Traditional marriage was obviously not fit for purpose and almost ubiquitously ended in one kind of failure or another, but at least it was an effort at something and not just a sad, sterile foreclosure on the possibility of life." Pay attention to this part in particular. "Of course, if we all stay alone and practice celibacy and carefully police our personal boundaries, many problems will be avoided. But it seems we will also have almost nothing left that makes life worthwhile. I guess you could say the old ways of being together were wrong. They were, and that we didn't want to repeat old mistakes. We didn't. But when we tore down what confined us, what did we have in mind to replace it? I offer no defense of coercive heterosexual monogamy." She's really not a fan of marriage, "except that it was at least a way of doing things, a way of seeing life through. What do we have now instead? Nothing. And we hate people for making mistakes so much more than we love them for doing good, that the easiest way to live is to do nothing, say nothing, and love no one." I think that's so insightful. We hate people for making mistakes so much more than we love them for doing good, that it's easier to just do nothing, say nothing, love no one. That's life on Twitter, right? And increasingly, it's offline life as well. The voice of a generation. Relationships are risky and burdensome. They impinge on our independence. They mess up our carefully curated selves and schedules. They tie us down and make us vulnerable. They demand energy and patience and self-awareness and forgiveness. Here's what C.S. Lewis wrote in his book, The Four Loves. It was published 60 years before Rooney, but it's tapping into something very similar. He says, "To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable. Friendship is messy because people are messy. How do you go with mess? Do you find yourself in a tangled situation and naturally try to draw back, extricate yourself, or lean in, pay more fierce attention, commit? My instinct is certainly to withdraw, but I have slowly become convinced that the opposite is both right and rewarding, that way lies joy, richness, fullness. Pain as well, awkwardness, scary vulnerability, sometimes betrayal, irritation, but joy. Speaking for myself, this is a lesson I have slowly learned, mostly from being part of a church community, or a few of them. One of the challenges of contemporary life is that participation in community organisations is much lower than it used to be. There's a lot of research tracking this, that we're less involved than previous generations in voluntary civic groups, whether that's charities, community projects, neighbourhood groups, sports teams, political parties, hobby groups, or of course, religious groups. There are some trends the other way, some movement towards recovering some of that thicker social texture. There are things like men's sheds, nextdoor.com, allotments and so on, but we have a long way to go. Lots of us, after leaving school and university, find that we no longer have places in our lives where we experience a lot of incidental contact with a lot of people without having to make a deliberate effort. In those spaces, we had frequent opportunities for cultivating friendships with some people, for being friendly with many more people, for people to notice how we're doing, and for us to notice how they're doing. Some people have workplaces that are a bit like that. Parents may find they're drawn into a thick community through their kids' schools. But the young people in Sally Rooney's novel exist in that no man's land between uni and parenthood, and they struggle with loneliness, with disconnection from others, and with uncertainty and fear around what it would require for things to be different. And I would say fair enough. What it requires is a lot. I want to talk briefly here about my experience of church, less because I'm trying to convince you that, aha, here is your solution, and more because I want to try to explain my own struggle with this paradox, wanting to withdraw, feeling compelled to lean in. Churches are places where a bunch of very random people come together. Some are like each other, some are nothing like each other. Many are awkward, many are struggling, all of us at some point. We may or may not form natural friendships, but the Bible that we read together with great seriousness rather audaciously says that we are to consider each other family. Family, non-negotiable, interdependent, for each other, committed to one another, year in, year out, ups and downs. This Bible also says, mourn with those who mourn, rejoice with those who rejoice, which means we end up doing more mourning than we otherwise would. Also, it means the joy is multiplied exponentially. It's tempting to opt out in various ways and at many points. And we do that too. We fail each other pretty regularly. Really, the reason that we persevere is not because we're clever and strategic about friendship and happiness and escaping the loneliness epidemic. It's because we believe this story about God, that he looked at the mess that is us, all of us, humanity, the world, and that instead of withdrawing from the mess, decluttering, shedding excess emotional baggage, he moved towards it. This is the Christmas story, actually. You know, Christmas coming up, after all, not to freak you out. God leans in so hard to the mess of being human that he actually becomes human. He chooses entanglement. He accepts the pain and the suffering that comes along with it. He accepts vulnerability. What more perfect picture of vulnerability than a helpless newborn? It's the Christmas story, really, that clinches for me the case that optimizing my friendships, practicing relationship minimalism, extreme introverting, is not going to make my life smooth and sunny. It's not going to be fulfilling. That the opposite is true, that it's out of the mess and the entanglement, the being tied down and burdened by others and being a burden to them, that something beautiful emerges. I've got nothing against the life-changing magic of tidying up, but I've also grudgingly, gradually, with constant stumbles, become convinced of the life-changing magic of messy relationships.
Thank you both so much for those wonderful talks. Let's welcome back our exceptional speakers, Natasha Moore and Sam Chan to this live discussion. For those at home, this is your time to ask questions. We've had loads coming in, and we encourage you to please continue to send in your questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. The Edge is meant for you, and for you to take our speakers to the edge. Please keep sending them in, and we'll do our best. First question, and now to throw to Sam. How can we know which attitude we hold towards ourselves and others? Can we swing between quadrants?
I'm sure context is everything, and we may find ourselves like in a football team, I will be in this quadrant, but when I'm at university, I'm in a different quadrant. When I'm at home with family, I'm in a different one. So I think the big thing is self-awareness, and so we just need to learn to be good at asking self-diagnostic questions.
Fantastic. And just thought I'd give a little update. Thank you for those sending through the questions. We've actually had people come in from all sorts of what I thought was exotic places. Truganina, I actually found out was in Melbourne, but I thought that was somewhere exotic. But we've had people come in from Cambodia as well as Leeds, and then Sydney, Brisbane and Newcastle. So thank you all for joining us. Question for Natasha, where did you get your pin from, actually?
Well, this was a gift.
There you go, wonderful.
I'm not sure I can say, but I think if you say something about it near social media, it will start presenting you with ads for it.
Wonderful. So. But on a serious note, how do you strike the balance of introversion and staying connected to people?
Not always very well. So this is a thing that I'm constantly working on and trying to figure out. You know, I've had kind of a policy for a couple of years now where I'm like, okay, Thursday night is introvert night. It's currently Thursday night, so like, it obviously doesn't always work out that well. So I balance my season of work and relationships and figure out, okay, am I getting irritable? Am I struggling with this? Do I need to kind of scale some things back? Do I need to schedule in some alone time? And I've just been reading a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which is a few years old now and is by an American pastor, and it's excellent. And I found it really helpful on kind of, he looks at the life of Jesus. One of the things he does is looks at the life of Jesus and go, he spends all this time, you know, he does what he has to go and have solitude and have silence. But then when things impinge on that, he rolls with it because he just really cares about people. So I feel like if I'm trying to do that thing where you love your neighbour as yourself, then there is a kind of, you know, thoughtfully going with the flow. That means you end up kind of connection with people breeds more connection with people.
Lovely. Sam, it's easy to have friends who are just like us. How can we have shared moments if there's language or cultural differences?
Yeah, that's fascinating because there are 3 layers to who we are. On the outside, there's interests, and then there's a middle layer, values, things that we value, see as good or bad. But there's this central layer, what is our worldview? What is our story, in other words? And it's always fascinating that people always begin on the outside layer, interests, like, oh, you like movies, I like movies. You like coffee, I like coffee. And then there's a middle layer, oh, you know, you believe in, you know, public education. I believe in public education. But after a while, we discover things that our interests only go so far. Oh, you like James Bond movies? Well, I don't. Or you like rugby union? I like rugby league. So they actually end up being very shallow relationships. So it's actually a worldview and shared common stories that really, really help. And I think in the end, that's the difference between acquaintances and friends. So acquaintances are the people we have friendly conversations with, you know, like the barista when you order your coffee, but you're not really going to invite that person to your wedding. They're not really an intimate, close friend. And so I think shared common story is the big one.
Yeah, fantastic. Natasha, can friendship be cultivated, or does there need to be an initial spark or attraction?
I'm going to float a thought here. Feel free to disagree with it. We'll see if this is true, and maybe I'll then disagree with it. I wonder if friendship is a bit like happiness, that it's this thing we really want and desire and that makes life amazing. But when it's the thing that you go after and pursue, it's quite elusive. So happiness is often a byproduct of pursuing other kind of meaningful important things in life, we kind of go, oh, I'm happy. Whereas when we kind of go, I just want to be happy, somehow it kind of always eludes us and things kind of crumble to dust. And I wonder if friendship can be a bit like that. If you're like, oh, I'm looking for who will my best friend be, and how can I have more friends, and I want that person to be my friend. That if that's the thing you're focusing on, it can be quite difficult to cultivate. But if you're focused on other things, and I think particularly on like trying to do things for other people, looking to the needs of other people, being like, okay, what does this person need? How can I help them? Then friendship is a thing that naturally grows in the midst of that. And, you know, it's so often that like the person that you'd pick as the person you'd get on with and who would become your good friend, you just kind of don't really end up gelling. And the person who you found kind of irritating at the start, or you thought they didn't like you at all, you kind of persevere and you're like, oh, let's be kind to each other, and maybe you're thrown together. You do end up cultivating this deep friendship. So I think there are some deliberate practices in terms of like, you know, actually taking risks with sharing yourself, like what you're actually going through, not kind of putting up a front or trying to compare or compete. There are things like that that can help, but also there's a serendipity to friendship where it can't really be planned out the way we maybe often want to plan out our lives.
No, that's great. Sam, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, that sort of makes
Agree,
sense because,
disagree?
you know, because the essence of friendship are human beings, and we're not robots. We're not computers. We're not puppy dogs. There's a raw, wild unpredictability to human beings, and so there would be with friendships. And, you know, I remember I have a friend, he was dumped 10 times in a row by this girl, and the 10th time I told him, that's it, just stop, just give up on her, like, stop. He went one more time, and, you know, she said yes, they're happily married, they've been happily married for 20 years. And you sort of realise, well, there's a rawness and unpredictability. And also, you know, if you're an Asian, you have this story where, you know, at high school you say, please, mum and dad, can I get a girlfriend? They go, no, not until you finish HSC. Finish HSC, can I get a girlfriend yet? They go, no, not until you finish uni. Finish uni. Please, now, can I get a girlfriend? They go, nah, not until, you know, you get a job. Get a job. Please, now, can I get a girlfriend? Not until you put a down payment on a house. So you put a down payment on a house, and then they come to you and they say, why aren't you married yet? What's wrong with you? You know, you think, oh, like they think there's this predictability, like an algorithm. And maybe that's what we struggle with in the Western world, where we know exactly what we're going to get at McDonald's, you know, this touch screen. I'm going to walk up, and we think friendships like that. I'm going to have a person that likes coffee, that likes walks by the park, and likes the beach. You know, we think it should be predictable. But as you say, there's this serendipity. Yeah, there's this rawness, there's this wildness. There's this book called Black Swan by Nicholas Nassim Taleb, was in the top 10 bestsellers list for, you know, years. And his big thing is black swan moments. You know, you can't predict when they happen. Just because things happen this way in the past doesn't mean they're going to happen this way in the future. So we need to embrace the seemingly randomness of life and
The chaos.
and embrace it. Yeah.
The mess.
Here's a question, Sam. It's a bit of almost pastoral in nature, which is, what do you do if you're continually sacrificing for friends, but it's not reciprocated? You know, where there isn't that, you know, mutuality in it. Is there something we can do or be aware of? Do we need to put our guard up and protect ourselves?
Yeah. So in the Bible, there's this book called Proverbs, and it's full of wisdom. So not what's true, not what's false, not what's good and bad, but what's wise. What is the apt thing to do? And there's so much stuff on friendship, and it is that sort of stuff. Should I be a friend with this person who never gives back? And it's a sort of a wisdom question. But maybe we could also ask ourselves, well, what am I wanting out of this friendship? Is it an insecurity where I need to feel needed? So we need to ask questions of the friendship, and also to know that although we need friends, we don't need to be friends with everyone. And that's a big key to friendship.
Any thoughts on that one, Natasha, in terms of, when you feel like you should either lean in more or perhaps pull away?
I was thinking of a particular conversation while you were talking that I once had with a friend who, she's a lot braver than I am, and we've been friends like for decades. And I remember having this conversation with her where she was like, you've remained friends with these people, and I've had a lot of friendships end, and like I don't know why that is. And we were kind of talking it through, and I was like, she has a way of when, you know, things are not working in a relationship, in a friendship, she's brave and she kind of will call it out and kind of confront that. And you know, that has led to friendships ending. And I'm not brave, and I have a way of just like pretending it's fine, or, you know, like seething inside, but, you know, not saying anything. And I don't think that's a better way. But what happened with some friendships over time, I found, is that, like, well, we are in different life stages. People are needier at some times. People change. And so some friendships that were kind of a bit rubbish at various points and had a lot of tensions, you know, we come out to a different time of our lives, and the fact that those bridges haven't been burned mean that we have something to kind of rebuild, and there's something about, you know, those long-standing old friendships that's really valuable. And so I don't really know, I still haven't figured out what the answer is in terms of actually, like, those are difficult conversations to have, to go, hey, there's a problem here, and I want to talk to you about it. And I think it's really good to have those conversations. I haven't figured out how best to have them. It takes a lot of kind of grace and humility on both sides, I think. But if that can be done well, then that can be such a kind of strengthener and beautifier for that friendship.
Yeah, because obviously if you can get through something like that, that means you've got some sort of a foundation. You've overcome something, you know. It's not going to just go to water every time there might be a disagreement, or, you know, you have different preferences. So.
And I think it plays into what we were saying before about that spark or attraction. Like, you might need something to, oh, we really like spending time together. But if whenever you stop enjoying spending time together and you're like, actually, this is a bit of a drag now, if you move on and find new friends, like, you never get the rewards of those kind of long-standing, this person knew me when I was, you know, a dumb teenager and all that kind of thing.
Fantastic. We got one more question here from the UK. We've got a question for both of you, actually. Whoever we'll go with you, Sam. Uni students are one of the loneliest groups of all. This is from Peter in the UK. Even though they have loads of social contact, is there any ideas why that is?
Yeah, you know, university is a hard time because everyone's picking and choosing their subjects. It's not like, and people are in such a rush, so you're not getting the proximity. And if you do sign up for a society, you know, the kayaking society or the rock climbing society, again, it's a shared interest and it's only just fleeting. And I've got to admit, I used to play rugby at my university for 5 years. Never once was there meaningful friendship from rugby, because you play your game and then you go your separate ways. So really is you need some sort of deeper community where there's some shared common story. And let's face it, in the Western world, those communities are getting harder and harder to find. I'm a parent. I read a lot of parenting books, especially by a guy called Stephen Biddulph. He says it takes a village to raise a child. You need to steer your child into a village, a community. And then he pauses, and I can tell even Stephen Biddulph is struggling to say, well, what's that community going to be? So he says, oh, a local sports team. But I know my kids play a lot of sports. There's no real community beyond the Saturday sport. Like, again, everyone goes their separate ways after the game's over. Then the next thing he says is church. Yes, he says church. And going to a church myself, I can see how there's a shared common transcendent story that transcends, you know, tribe, tongue, culture, language.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think it's one of the most wonderful things when you travel, and I'm sure we've all had those experiences where you're overseas, and just by virtue of that, you can find community and then be out at dinner that very evening because of that shared story. This is another question for you, Sam, which is, are there strategies to move into the safe and secure sweet spot? That's from Valerie in Sydney. So can we move into that safe and secure sweet spot?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I actually had to see a counsellor myself. I've been burnt by a few bad relationships. And I think the counsellor actually asked me, what are you looking for? And I thought, you know what? I'm looking for approval from, and for me, it was a father figure. Like, I was converting people into father figures and desperately needing their approval. And it could have been someone like a rugby coach, a surfing coach, my boss, for example. And I thought, wow, I'm actually profoundly insecure. And not that these people are the problem, but I'm looking for love in all the wrong places. I'm asking people to be someone they cannot be. And that's where I had to sit back there. Okay, well, again, in my Christian tradition, I say to myself, I have an earthly father and he loves me. I don't have to look elsewhere. But in the Christian tradition, I also have a heavenly father who adopts me, loves me unconditionally. So if I can be secure in that relationship, I don't have to overfunction and overperform in other relationships and ask them to do what they cannot do and destroy the other person because I'm asking too much from that other person.
Any thoughts on that, Natasha, in terms of that security?
Can I add something to the uni students?
Please.
I'm going to just
go there.
Backtrack here. Because I was thinking about how, tonight's theme is the never more connected, never more lonely. And I feel like neither of us has talked that much about the technology thing, right? Which is particularly for young people, I think, quite influential. How much are we connected through our phones, but how much of a screen does that put up between us and other people? And I was thinking about this in terms of, I had a conversation with a good friend recently. We're both what are apparently called geriatric millennials. We're like the oldest edge of the millennial generation. And she and I have very different approaches. So she's a phone person. She'll call people on the phone. I like, younger millennials and Gen Z are like allergic to. They're like, why would you call someone? I won't pick up my phone. Like, we'll text and I will take my time. And so we kind of had a conversation about like why I kind of freak out when she calls me, but she's like, why can't we just talk? And I was thinking about how that's a kind of interruption, the way that we don't have so much, like we make plans to see people, but we don't have that practice anymore of kind of dropping round to each other's houses, like of just kind of incidentally running into people and accommodating that mess, right? And how I wonder if there's an art that people are kind of figuring out of how do we use technology in ways that genuinely connect us, and then work on those ways that they're actually separating us or giving us a way to kind of push people away or keep them in a box that's kind of safer. So I think maybe like saying yes and no to our technology, like thinking about that in quite, reflective ways instead of just going with the flow of like, it's easy to get the dopamine hit of the notification, but that doesn't require anything of me, any actual connection to people, as opposed to a call, which does.
Yeah, because my wife and I, we do date night once a week, well, pre-COVID, post-COVID, and the instant we jump in the car to drive off somewhere romantic, my wife pulls out her phone and she's starting to check her messages. And I say, what are you doing? She said, I just got to get on top of this email. I'm like, what are you doing? And apparently what the phone says is, right now, I'm afraid that out there is something more interesting than what I have going on in front of me right now.
She might dispute that interpretation.
And that's what phones have done. They've robbed us of being present in the moment with that person that we're face to face with.
That's fantastic. I think we're going to have to wrap it up, and even though there's some brilliant questions still coming through on the impacts of social media, and I'd love, obviously, perhaps in your closing remarks, if I could suggest like what we can do personally to ensure social media doesn't rob us of what genuine friendship can offer. But love to hear from you all. What would you say to tonight's audience as a take home for them? As where is the hope to be found in how we do friendship and connectedness in this age of loneliness? Happy to go to you first.
Wow. So for me, what I learned was, I need to be secure in who I am, so I don't look for esteem and validation and don't require it from a relationship and therefore destroy the person because I'm asking them to do something they can't. Also, I need the freedom to sacrifice. And again, this is where my Christian worldview empowers me, because I believe in a Jesus, a Son of God, who gave up everything, and I realise it's in my DNA to give. And this is a great irony of relationships. We think if I give, I'm going to be drained and become empty, but somehow in giving, we become empowered, and it's actually in our DNA. And in the Christian worldview says, yes, of course it is, because it's in the DNA, the rhythm, the fabric of the universe, because behind this universe is a creator who gives. And when we image a giving creator, we're in rhythm, we're in resonance, we're in tune with this universe.
That's wonderful. Natasha, anything to add to that?
Oh.
I know, hard act to follow.
I would just say something really simple, I think, which is that loneliness can make us, it kind of turns us inwards. Those statistics about people not being willing to talk about being lonely, like it's this kind of thing that makes you feel just kind of tainted and just so disconnected from others, and like you can't get out of that hole. And that one of the real antidotes to that, I think, is to decide to be outward looking. So rather than like, what's wrong with me, or like everything is terrible for me, to be like, well, okay, what's going on with other people? Because everyone else is struggling with something as well. And one of the most wonderful and kind of counterintuitive antidotes to that is to be like, who can I serve? Who can I help? What can I volunteer to do? And that kind of kicks off a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious one of bringing you out of yourself, of connecting you with other people. And it can be something really kind of simple, just a start on that journey that we can come back to again and again. Be like, what do other people need? And go for that.
That's beautiful. What a wonderful note to end on. Thank you both so much for what's been a wonderful discussion. Thank you for sharing your insights, but also your honesty and little bits of your own stories and temperaments in terms of how this, interacts for you both. This is a perfect topic for us to discuss and to consider at our Third Space team. And for those that don't know, Third Space is a national initiative of City Bible Forum, providing an engaging community and spaces for intelligent conversations about God. We'd love to connect with you in person. We have over 1,000 people engaged in our many networks around Australia, and there is most certainly space for you. Leave your contact details on the feedback form, and one of our team will get in touch. Before we leave, I'd like to draw your attention to the bottom of the event page or inside of your event booklet. So there's 3 things. Firstly, feedback. Your feedback is exceptionally valuable to us. To make these events even better in the future, in the booklet, you will find the QR code for the feedback form for the Edge. Can you take a moment to find the page and fill in the form? This should only take 2 minutes, and this helps us keep the conversation going. Number 2, resources. There are more great resources on this topic in our Third Space resource library. You can start by going to the back of the event booklet or to the bottom of the event webpage and clicking on the link. The podcast, The Bigger Questions with Rob Martin, is worth highlighting. The episode is Intimacy, Going Beyond Shallow Relationships. And number 3, and finally, our next event is on the 11th of November. It's the Smith Lecture, The Art of Gentleness, a radical alternative in an age of outrage, with Dr. Michael Jensen. And you can find more about this event and be sure to register tonight through that information pack. The information is in the Edge booklet, and we'll be back for the feedback material you will receive in the days to come. Thank you for being here tonight at the final Edge event of 2021. Also, thank you to Audio Advice and, of course, to our speakers, Dr. Natasha Moore and Dr. Sam Chan. We want to thank you for making this event possible. I'm Daniel Principe for The Edge. We hope you've enjoyed this night, and we hand back over to Russell Matthews.
Well, thank you for being a part of The Edge tonight. We want to thank our speakers, the moderator, City Bible Forum, team members, and the crew behind the scenes. Thank you for being a part of this evening. We want to thank you for making this whole event possible. We hope you enjoyed the night. We will be sending you an email to ask you for your feedback for tonight's event. Your feedback is exceptionally valuable to us, and it helps to make these events even better in the future. Along with the feedback form, you will receive resources that will complement this evening's discussion, and also a way for us to share with you about future events from The Edge and City Bible Forum. Our goal is to keep the conversation going. We want to hear from you and encourage more discussions on many of the topics brought up tonight. Thank you again for being part of The Edge. I'm Russ Matthews from City Bible Forum. We hope you enjoyed tonight's event, and we look forward to seeing you in the future as we take the next topic to The Edge.